Hello, everyone. This is Sasha with the LTRC. Thank you for joining us for maintaining an efficient law practice while working remotely with our sponsor, CosmoLex, as part of the LTRC Industry Insight Series held every Wednesday. Our speaker today is Erica Birstler. Erica is the Vice President of CosmoLex with nearly a decade of experience in the legal software industry, catering to the specialized technology needs of small to mid-sized law firms. Erica is passionate about helping legal professionals improve the way their law firms run, and she has given numerous presentations across North America on legal technologies, such as law practice technology management, cloud computing, legal billing, and trust accounting compliance. Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Thank you so much for having me. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate you attending today's session. I have to say that working remotely is definitely a hot topic these days. I think that it is an adjustment for many because some of you have never worked from home, never worked from another location, or never had to worry about your staff doing those types of things. So I think it's important to attend as many sessions and gain as much knowledge as you possibly can, because this is not going to be a short-term effect. And I'm talking about technology. Just the impact that technology has had in the current situation will drastically change how businesses function going forward. So I do think that all the tips that we talk about today and that you'll hear about in other sessions can be valuable long-term, way past when this pandemic is over with. So what we'll be talking about specifically, our agenda today is one, why law firms should provide remote work options. So notice I say options. So right now, of course, it is kind of not an option. It's a requirement for many of you to work from wherever you may be located and not in the office. But working remotely is not a new concept. Some of you may have worked remotely before. Some of you, this may be a very new concept for you. But for instance, I'll speak for myself. At CosmoLex, we are primarily located in our office. All of our roles, for the most part, are located in an office. But I have worked from home time to time. My staff has also worked from home time to time. So we've had an exposure to it in the past. And now everybody's had an exposure to it. And we need to see what that means going forward in terms of the policies and the options that you want to provide. Now, there are a lot of benefits to having options, but also there are challenges if you don't. So I think it's more important to see, while the benefits are important, it's more about what issues can arise if you don't even have those options available. And many of you might have experienced that through this process. I think the first couple of weeks of this pandemic was chaotic for many businesses who were not used to working remotely and figuring out all the different challenges that can come with that. And a lot of what we talk about today may be situation you've already been through and learned from, or things that you've not yet experienced. So I definitely say, when working remotely, don't look at this as a short-term solution. Like I said, the way we look at technology during this time has changed drastically. And I truly believe it's going to change how businesses operate, schools operate, how we communicate personally as well as professionally. There'll be quite a change in the conversation around technology. Now, speaking of technology, you want to leverage the right tools. So we'll talk a bit about cloud and what exactly that means, because a lot of what allows remote work is being able to access the information you need through the internet and not have to physically be in a certain location. So that's when cloud comes into play quite a bit. Also, maybe there's changes to new tools or new processes that have to be adopted when working in different locations or having to do things a little bit differently. I know there's a lot of businesses that are struggling with the fact that they can't just call a meeting and see each other face to face. You can still do that, but there's other ways of going about it. And then I'll kind of contribute a little bit my own personal experience. Like I said, I myself have been working remotely for the last 7 weeks now. I've never worked remotely long term. I've always had an office job. I've always gone into the office every single day. Situationally, I might work from a different location, like travel or different scenarios, but this is new for me as well. And I've learned a lot personally through this process. Our business has learned a lot through this process. And I hope to contribute that to today and our topic. And then lastly is the best practices when working remotely. So some tips to keep in mind when adopting new technology, but also the new environment. It is very different and it can be struggle for many people. It sounds great in theory, to work from home and not see people every day. I think we're all getting a bit used to that, unfortunately. But there's some struggles with that as well. So I have some tips at the very end for that. Okay, so why law firms should provide remote work options? I think it's kind of self-explanatory today given the current situation, but I want you to keep these things in mind past this. When we're back to normal, day-to-day work, you want to think of these points then as well. So the first thing is coming to the office might not be an option. This is what we're experiencing right now. For the longest time when talking about cloud, I would hear people say, oh, I don't work from home. I don't travel. I only go to my office. I don't travel to clients' location. This doesn't apply to me. Well, it's officially applied to everybody because many of us don't have the option. It's out of our control. But there's other situations like bad weather, hurricanes, tornadoes, those acts of God that you have no control over, sickness or injury. Like we personally have had people that broke their leg, or I personally have had, I have back problems. So if my back goes out, I can't physically get into the office, but I'm okay and I'm feeling well enough to work if I need to. Also, if something happens to your office space, God forbid there's a flood or fire, or for whatever reason, your building is inaccessible. These are all things out of your control. And though they may be rare, you want to be prepared to operate no matter what the situation. You don't want to have to close your doors or not be able to service your clients because of some extenuating circumstances. So that's something to always keep in mind. You may not have the choice. The second is if you have urgent matters off hours. Now, some of you, pick up the phone no matter. Everything rings to your cell phone. You're accessible no matter where you are. Some of you might only be accessible during your business hours. Keep in mind, though, if something happens on the night, on the weekend that's urgent, how are you able to handle that if you don't have access to your information that is located in the office? Full access on travel. So I think a lot of time when people think of travel, they may be thinking of personal travel. Oh, when I'm on vacation, I'm not working. Well, that's one example. But what about if you're traveling to a conference? Or even if you do have a 2-hour drive to see a client face to face and you don't have the information that you need and you don't have any way to access it, that could affect the relationship that you have with your client. And being able to access that right away can also help you to work more efficiently and more effectively with them. Providing flexibility. This is something that's quite interesting. I feel like with the current situation, one thing that really changed the game is when schools closed. When schools closed, kids were home, daycare was not an option for the millions of children that now had to stay home. And that's one of the things that preempted a lot of businesses to start having their employees work from home, because it was a personal situation that affected everybody's day-to-day life. If you're able to provide flexibility for if, I have a child that's sick at home, or I'm taking care of a family member, instead of putting in PTO and not working at all, if there was flexibility available, I might be able to still continue to work regardless of my personal situation. Now, you'll have to decide what the policy will be on that, how that's offered, who that's offered to, but again, it reduces the possibility of having, low staff or low resource situations if something comes up. And the last point that most people don't even think about is your staff. So if you have certain resources that you require, you no longer have to just look in your town. People that could physically commute to your office. It could be from anywhere. It could be, a very common example is a bookkeeper. I know many law firms that outsource their bookkeepers. However, many of them still have their data on premise, so that bookkeeper has to come in every 2 weeks or every month to do certain routine activities. If they can access that information from where they are, they can do that work in real time. Your data remains more accurate, but you also expand your talent pool. The numbers of people that you could possibly hire increases dramatically if you're not restricted to your location. Okay. So like I said, these things keep in mind well past this situation, those benefits will still be there. And when you're running your practice, and many of you may be thinking of these things now, what are the functions that you need to consider when working outside of the office? Now, we know our day-to-day routine when we're in the office, but some things can shift and change, and there may be things we did not think about if we're not using the technology in the business or physically at the location. So you have to manage your agenda, being able to access your appointments, your meetings, checklists, deadlines, timelines that you have on cases. Also your communication, being able to call your clients, being able to pick up calls coming in, being able to email effectively, or however else you're communicating with your clients. Securely sharing. You want to make sure that no matter where you are, again, that you're able to share that information with your client securely. Usually it could be documents or written communication. That confidentiality does not go away if you're working remotely. You want to keep that in mind. Billing, that's how you get paid. I think at the very beginning of this situation, many people put off some routine activities thinking this would resolve short term. We'll deal with it when we get back to the office. This is now long term. So you can't go this time without billing because then you won't get paid. So being able to follow the full billing process, capture all that information, ensure it gets sent out to your clients, and that you can also receive payments is a very important part to making sure you can be successful during this time. And then being able to track funds, whether it's client funds, so the trust account, retainers, available funds specifically for your clients, or the money that you need to pay out as a business. There's many vendors that you still need to pay and ensure that those bills get paid out on time. So as we're talking about the different functions, I mentioned that we're going to talk a little bit about cloud. So when I'm talking about cloud, these benefits here specifically are related to native cloud applications. What I mean by native is in a program that can be accessed via a browser. So if all you need is a device with internet access and a browser, that's considered a native cloud application. Common examples are your email, social media, online banking. All you do is log in. That's all that's required. That's considered native cloud. Now, if you choose, or if you're currently using hosted cloud, and what I mean by that is you are going through a third-party company to host your Windows environment that you can then remote into. The main benefit there is mobility. So if all you care about is mobility, you can access it that way, but many of these benefits listed here will not apply. You'll still have limitations on what devices that you can use and the functionality that you will have. So do keep that in mind. If you're using a native cloud tool, as I said, those include access on any device. Usually, like if you think of your bank account, you can access on a website. You can access on a mobile app. You have full flexibility there. You have modern functionality, but also additional integrations. A lot of tools play very nicely with other cloud tools. Self-maintained. So this concept of SaaS, which is at the bottom there as well, software as a service, usually includes updates, backups, sometimes support and training as well. And you're eliminating or reducing your hardware dependency. So what I mean by that is by me personally having all of my applications as native cloud applications, if my computer were to crash, I could simply pick up another device and continue everything that I need to do. I'm not dependent on a particular computer. I'm not dependent on a particular server. I just need internet access pretty much. So those are some things to keep in mind going forward if you want to adopt more cloud. And now we're going to talk about tools specifically. So the different functions to keep in mind. I'll give example of a few tools that I've used personally that I know other law firms use as well. And do keep in mind a couple things. One is each firm's preference may differ. What functions are important to you, the priorities. I'm sure many of us have shifted our priorities over the past several weeks. What is most important? Those have to be kept in mind, but also think about the tools that you currently have. You may have tools right now that you're learning all new things about because you're having to use them in a different situation. So you want to think about, okay, well, what is my current system capable of? What is it not capable of? Is that creating a gap, and how do I fill that gap? And maybe different ways of going about that. So the first thing I want to talk about is your phone system. So when talking about a phone system, there's this concept of VoIP, or voice over IP. Basically, it's your phone through internet. There's a lot of traditional businesses, especially law firms also, that do not use yet VoIP-based phone systems. That restricts you to your particular location in terms of your phone service. With internet-based phone, you get a few benefits that I listed here. So you have clearer voice quality, so just the overall performance of your conversations is much better. You have better portability. So to give an example, CosmoLex as a company, we use a tool called Ring Central. We've also used a tool called Jive. There's many different applications out there, but it's internet-based. So when we transitioned from in the office to working from home, the great thing is we could access the phone either physically at our desk at the office with our desk phone, or on our computer, which is called a soft phone. So right now, I'm working from home myself. I have no physical desk phone. I just operate my phone through my computer. I can call, I can transfer, I could see voicemails, I can conference, all the usual tasks that I need to do, I could do directly from my computer. I also could do it from my cell phone. I have the ability to forward to my cell phone, so that way if somebody dials my extension and I'm not by my computer for some reason, my cell phone will ring. So you get those additional features. Also, administrative tools. So being able to, you basically get a portal, a website where you can see the users, the calls, the recordings, transcripted voicemails. You could reference back to previous calls. You could see the volume of calls that come in. You could do reporting on that. So there's a lot more benefit than just, in this situation, just going forward, you'll get more analytics out of your phones. Video conferencing. I think a couple weeks ago or several weeks ago, this is something that I talked about a lot more. A lot more people were unaware of video conferencing. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think we've all started to use it, whether it's personally or professionally. But a few points I wanted to mention is how important this is wherever the situation takes you. So if you're ever working with somebody who is outside your office, that could be a vendor you're working with, that could be an outsourced staff, that could be a client. It drastically improves your engagement when you are not in the same physical location as somebody else. You get eye contact, you sense body language. You have so much more, your attention span is so different when you're physically looking at somebody than if you're just talking to them on the phone. So I highly recommend having something long-term in place, so not just in this situation, but long-term, if you're ever working with somebody in a different location, to really build that relationship through video conferencing. We right now are on Zoom. Zoom has a video conferencing tool that's very popular right now, especially. At CosmoLex, we use GoToMeeting quite a bit. And you do want to keep in mind the security of those tools and what you're using those tools for. For instance, with GoToMeeting, I have a function to lock the meeting. I personally love that function. So if I invite somebody to a particular meeting, they're there, I can lock it so that nobody else can come in. And then I avoid even just an accidental interruption. And some tools have that. I'm not sure if Zoom does, but keep in mind the tools that you're looking at and what your requirements are. Cloud storage. I think whenever you're talking about cloud, law firms especially, think first of their documents. It takes up the most space, also has the highest security requirements, and there's a lot of benefits to it though. And again, you're thinking long-term, because I don't think moving your documents to cloud is not a small endeavor. It's sometimes a massive process, depending on how much documentation you have, but just something to think about going forward. You can access your documents from anywhere. You can use it as a main storage or a backup. So if you wanted to store all of your documents to, OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox. You could just have your documents go straight there and have nothing saved locally. Or you can have documents saved locally and have them sync with the cloud. That gives you a bit of redundancy there, that gives you backup, but also allows you to access those documents no matter where you are. Understand the vendors that you're working with. Very often they do include encryption and data redundancy. So encryption is basically your information is coded, sometimes can even be password protected, so only certain people can access it. And data redundancy is cloud basically is massive servers. These cloud providers have servers that are physically storing your data. Redundancy is where is that backup stored? Is it in the same building? Is it a different building? Because that matters. If something were to happen to, like for instance, our data is through Amazon Web Services. We have multiple data centers, multiple redundancy. If one of those data centers were to go down for whatever reason, it would have to be fairly catastrophic, but if it did, we now have a duplicate server that has that information as well. You lower your IT costs. You don't have to have an internal server. You don't have to depend on your hardware. And you can also leverage tools like client portals, shared folders, those secure mechanisms to deliver documents and important information back and forth. We personally, internally at CosmoLex, we use Google Drive quite a bit. Most law firms use Office 365 products like OneDrive. I also know a lot of law firms use tools like WorldDocs or NetDocs. Those are all document storage applications with cloud options. For internal chat or commenting, so I'll keep this short. It may be more relevant for certain businesses than others, but I just want to mention, especially in the situation that we are right now, being able to communicate effectively is incredibly important. And I think there's a lot of communication gaps because there's so many people used to walking over to somebody's desk or having a physical meeting or having a discussion by the water cooler, and that goes away. So you need to fill that gap. You still need to make sure that those important conversations are still taking place, but are not taking up everybody's time. We use at CosmoLex Slack. That's a very well-known chat tool. Also Microsoft Teams. That I think has been somewhat recently introduced, but it's very popular because it's part of the Microsoft suite. Basically an internal chat tool. Allows you to create groups, conversations. I can tag somebody really quickly on a quick question, and they can multitask in case they're on the phone or they're in a meeting and be able to interact with me through a different medium. Commenting as well, if you have any type of tool for your task management, for your billing, anything that you collaborate with other people on, see if there's the ability to comment and tag someone. So an example is, I said we use Google Docs internally. I always tag, like I do a comment and I tag a particular person on whatever they need to review or whatever they need to complete. And that way they get a notification. We're effectively collaborating without actually having a conversation. But everything's getting done and it's working like a well-oiled machine. Task management. I think we all know what task management is, having to-do lists, knowing what you need to complete for the day. I think this is one area that tends to be overlooked. People think, oh, well, I have my notebook that has my to-do list, or I have my Post-its that tell me what I need to do. But especially when working remotely, there's two things that are a little bit more difficult. One is collaboration, working together. The other is accountability. So if you have somebody working from home full time, how can you hold them accountable to their tasks or to their job and make sure they're actually working during the business hours? A great way is through task management. The things that need to be completed, have them assigned, have due dates, have those commenting functions turned on so that you can collaborate a little bit better. Help them to prioritize. Time management can be a big struggle when not in a typical office environment, and this can help encourage that. It also helps with delegation. If you are in a situation, whether remote or not, and you need to ensure that whatever you're doing now needs to get passed to somebody else, having a task checklist or something that you use day in and day out and just reassigning it to somebody is a really easy way to encourage that delegation. There are task management tools on their own. We, again, use a tool called Teamwork. There's also a tool called Monday.com that a lot of people use. Trello is another one that I've heard of quite a bit. It needs to fit your needs. They vary in terms of functionality. You may need something extremely simple, but the main thing is the collaboration, the ability to assign it to somebody, the ability to put a description and comment. Those help a lot with accountability. You may also have a practice management tool that has tasks built in, but you may not be utilizing it. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Password management. This is a big one, especially if you're starting to utilize cloud. All right, I have all these different cloud applications and I have so many passwords. How do I keep them straight? Or I have a new cloud tool and it's requiring this very secure password and I don't know what to come up with, or I struggle to remember it, so on and so forth. So there are password management software. If you're not currently using it, I highly recommend it, both professionally and personally. I myself use 1Password. There's also a tool called LastPass, and there's a variety of different ones. I know there's Apple products as well. The idea is to securely store all of your passwords in a tool that has one master password to access. And that master password has to be, usually it's a key and a password. It's a combination of things. The benefits is you only have to remember one password. You actually should not be remembering your passwords. I think often we choose passwords that we hope, oh, that's an easy one to remember. I'll be able to remember that next time, or we use the same password across the board. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. You need complex, unique, secure passwords, because if somebody accesses one password, they can open the gates to everything else that you're utilizing. So you want to make sure not just you personally, but your staff, especially from a business perspective, there needs to be a policy in place. We have a policy that every single password we use has to be in our password management tool. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, so that we know if something needed to be changed, it can be changed the right way and it be accessed the right way. And can be used across all devices. So no matter where I am, I know where my passwords are. I actually use a Chrome extension. So I have, if I'm on a particular website, there's a little button right at the top I click. It pre-fills my login and I'm good to go. But somebody would have to log into will have to have my computer and log into that tool with my master password in order to access that information. And the last item here is legal practice management as a whole. So I mentioned in the very beginning about you may already have tools that can meet a lot of these requirements. Very often, they can be in the form of a legal practice management software. That is something very common in the legal space. Usually they include calendaring, task management, document management, billing. Many also include accounting, client portals. Their list kind of is endless. So the first thing is understanding what type of technology is your practice management software. Is it on-premise or is it cloud? If it's on-premise, which means installed locally in your office on a server, how are you going to access that outside the office? I'm sure many of you have already gone through this process, have either come up with a way to remote into the server, or maybe have hosted the data, or some people have even switched to cloud practice management tools in this time because their data was essentially inaccessible. What functionality you want where? So all the different things that we talked about. Do you want a tool that's under one roof? Majority of things are in one application, or something that's integration focused, a system that has fairly simple functionality at its core, but integrates with other tools to give you the experience, like for instance, integrating with a task management tool that you really like, and syncs or somehow integrates between the two. That does require purchasing multiple tools, of course, and being able to support the multiple tools, but that may be a setup that you prefer. At the end of the day, you need to make sure that your legal functionality and your compliance remain intact. And there's different things. It could be how your billing's done. It could be how your accounting's done. It could be how your trust accounting's done. It could be how you manage your deadlines. It could be how you manage your documents. Compliance is a very broad term and can vary based on the type of law that you practice. Just keep in mind that with whatever tools that you use, that is first. You want to make sure that you are meeting those requirements. And for the tools that it's not relevant for, which it can be, you may be able to use a little bit more generic, like video conferencing, for instance. You don't need a legal specific video conferencing tool, but you need to be aware of security, as an example. And the last thing we'll talk about is best practices. So this is just, some of these we've already kind of covered, more of a summation here, but have unique and complex passwords. I know it may seem frustrating, it may seem cumbersome, but it's well worth it to have these complex passwords that you actually don't even remember. That's the idea, because if you can remember it, chances are somebody else can remember it. And do not use the same password across the board for anything, whether it's professional or personal. Look for tools with multi-factor authentication. What that means, sometimes called two-factor authentication, you've all used it. It's when you log into a program and it texts you a code for you to enter. Again, many people get frustrated by that, but that is for your protection, especially things like your email. That is one of the passwords you want to keep the most secure, because people, let's say I get access to your online bank account or whatever account. If I also have access to your email, I can reset that password. So you want to keep your email password as secure as possible. Multi-factor means they would have to have my login plus my cell phone in order to log in. So it's just an extra layer of protection that's in your control. See if your current tools have it. If they do, go ahead and implement it, and you can implement it for the rest of your staff if you're the administrator on those tools. Define privileges and access control. Especially when you can't look over somebody's shoulder or see specifically what they're doing, ensure the tools that you're using, you're taking the time to understand the people, their roles, the access that they should have, and set it accordingly. Make sure you have visibility as to all the different functions that are being done. Who added this, deleted this, edited that. Usually they're called audit logs, and the administrator should have access to that. And ensure all of your information is encrypted. Encrypted pretty much means it is a code that needs to be cracked in order for somebody to access that information. Encryption at rest means if you're using a cloud product on their servers while it's sitting there, even if it's not being used, it is still encrypted. So you want to ensure to look for that. 256-bit is the industry standard. That's considered bank grade security. And lastly is know where your data is stored and where it is backed up. There are companies that store their data over in Europe or some other country. So know where it is, because often the data is in that jurisdiction, but also if there's a backup, where is that backup? Is it in the same location? Is it different? Is it copied in real time? Is there a delay in that copy? Those are the types of questions you should ask. And then the last is just about wellness. I think that especially right now, as we're working in, most of us from home, most of us in very different situations, it's important to keep it as routine as possible, keep as structured as possible, limit your distractions during that time. I know it's really difficult, especially for those with children and families, but coming up with a way to focus even for short spurts of time to ensure that you're still able to run your business the best way possible. Video conference whenever, because like I said, I think there's a lot of value there, and still take regular breaks and stay active. Drink your water, walk around, go for a walk outside, get some fresh air. I think our mental health and our physical health is very important, and you want to make sure to keep that up during these times. So that wraps up our session today. Thank you all for joining myself and the CosmoLex team for this Industry Insight webinar. You can visit CosmoLex.com for more information on CosmoLex and our newest initiatives.